Assalamu alaikum everyone, peace be upon you and praise be to God, the most awesome. Today I want to talk about the subject of divorce according to the Qur'an, and we have a Qur'an inspector open here, and we have 15 matching entries on the word divorce in the Qur'an. So let's go over some of these, inshallah. We seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Bismillah. 2:226 talks about men who want to divorce their wives must wait 4 months. So naturally this verse is addressing the men because it's saying those who intend to divorce their wives, not their husbands, must wait 4 months. This 4 months, of course, is a cooling off period. It's a period where the couple may ruminate about their marriage and whether they can proceed and make it work or not. So it's important that we don't make hasty decisions when it comes to divorce. And sometimes that's out of our control. We might have a partner who doesn't agree with this and we can't control that, and that's okay. But as far as we have control over, we should wait for those 4 months. And additionally, since this verse does not address women, and this is my opinion, everyone should read the Quran and formulate their own understanding according to God's words, is that God is giving women more benefit of doubt than men, because he's addressing the waiting period only to the case where men want to break off the divorce. So this keeps women safer, protects their rights, and because, as we may know already in the Quran, God has given that responsibility of taking care of a household to the man. So this responsibility of divorce is also falling upon the man if he's the one who wishes to initiate the divorce. And then 2:27, if they decide on the divorce, God is here, knower. Okay, so the next verse, 2:28, it's talking about the divorced women waiting 3 menstruation cycles. This is to ensure that there's no pregnancy that has occurred, and if there is a pregnancy, if that's found out, it's more lawful that the husbands remarry them if they wish to reconcile. And this makes sense naturally because now you have a child to take into consideration, and putting aside your own ego is the goal here, and being able to do that it takes strength, and it's something that's important to do, especially when a woman is pregnant. Then the couple needs to put aside their egos and try to make that relationship work. And the verse continues, in that case women will have rights and obligations, but men will have more than them. So in this particular situation of pregnancy, yes, the men do have the last say if both members do consider themselves submitters to God or Muslims. Okay, next verse, Surah 2:229. Divorce may be retracted twice. It is either reconciliation in a righteous manner or separation in a righteous manner. It is not lawful for the husbands to take back anything they had given women. So again, women's rights is the theme in many of these verses. However, the couple may fear that they transgress God's law. And I've always interpreted this as maybe there's a conflict in deciding over property. And in these cases, the wife is the one who can decide if she just wants to give that thing up to avoid committing an unrighteous act or being angry, whatever it may be that would lead to that feeling. So these are God's limits. Do not violate them. Those who violate God's limits are the unjust. And if he divorces her after twice retracting divorce, so you've settled on a divorce, you've waited 4 months, you've decided, okay, I don't want to, or within those 4 months, I don't want to go through with this divorce, I'm retracting it. Okay, but he does that twice. Now he cannot remarry her unless she first remarries another man. And I think this speaks a lot to the ego of the human being. That's going to be hard for a lot of men to accept because naturally we men, we have more ego. And to think of someone that we love, or maybe it's not love, maybe it's just a controlling feeling even because this person's your wife and maybe you feel like you have that upper hand or something. But now you have to think about her marrying another guy, and that's a difficult pill for a lot of men to swallow. So the first husband cannot remarry her unless she first marries another man, in the case that he retracted divorce twice and decided to go through with a third divorce. If you divorce the women once they fulfill their interim, you either reconcile with them in a righteous manner or let them go in a righteous manner. Do not force them to stay against their will as a revenge. So maybe you have kids, maybe whatever, and the man is trying to pressure his wife into staying in the same home to take care of him. But that's very difficult because a lot of women will tell you that there's a lot of pressure being around someone that you don't want to be with. That's why the divorce is happening to begin with. So again, women's rights, you definitely cannot force an ex-wife to stay with you as a form of revenge. Anyone who does this wrongs his own soul. Do not take God's revelations in vain. Remember God's blessings upon you, and that he sent down to you the scripture and the judging laws to enlighten you. You shall reverence God and know that God is aware of everything. So if you divorce the women, once they fulfill that 4-month interim or their 3-month interim, do not prevent them from remarrying their husbands if they reconcile amicably. This shall be heeded by those among you who believe in God in the last day. This is better and a pure option for you. God knows while you do not know. So whenever possible, if the couple is willing to reconcile in a kind, amicable manner, meaning in a nice, righteous manner, then that's the better and pure option, God says. So a couple should always try to make it work, and that might be going to couples therapy before it's too late, or just doing the right thing and talking to your wife and being a little more sensitive to her emotions and vice versa. So 233, divorced mothers shall nurse their infants 2 full years. So the mothers do have a responsibility of nursing their child. Of course, that makes sense naturally. And meanwhile, the father shall provide the mother's food and clothing equitably. So again, you have to take care of not just your ex-wife, but the mother of your child. No one shall be burdened beyond his ability. Some husbands might be able to provide $500 a month in meals to their wife. Other husbands might be able to do $200. So to each to their own ability. And God is fully aware of their honesty and intention. No mother shall be harmed on account of her infant, nor shall the father be harmed because of his infant. The inheritor shall assume these responsibilities. If the infant's parents mutually agree to part after due consultation, they commit no error by doing so. You commit no error by hiring nursing mothers, so long as you pay them fairly or equitably. You shall reverence God and know that God is seer of everything you do. Now in 237 we learn about divorce before any intercourse is happening between the couple. So if you divorce them before touching them, but after you had set any financial arrangement with them, some might call this a dowry, then the compensation shall be half of that, unless they, the women, voluntarily forfeit their rights. So a woman can say, you know what, this marriage is not going to work out. We've only been together for a day or two, or whatever it is. We haven't slept together. And I want to give you back what you've given me. Let's just call this quits here. So, and then the verse continues, or the party responsible for causing the divorce chooses to forfeit that. So, to forfeit is closer to righteousness or piousness. Do not overlook the amicable bond you have had. God is seer of everything you do. 2:241, the divorcees shall also be provided for equitably. This is a duty upon the reverent. And I'm trying to find, there is a verse that talks about providing for a full year. So give me a moment to pull that up. Okay, so the verse is 2:240, which says, those who die and leave wives, a will shall provide their wives with support for a year, provided they stay within the same household. If they leave, you commit no sin by letting them do whatever righteous manners they wish to do. God is almighty, possessor of judgment. So this first verse is in the case of death. Okay, so the woman might need to stay in the same home she's always lived in because that's her home and she wants to stay there. So the husband, at a minimum, must provide for a year. So she doesn't go hungry or be forced to sell the home or whatever it is. So she has time to remarry if she wishes, get a job, whatever it may be. But in the next verse, we also see that the divorcees also shall be provided for equitably. This is a duty upon the reverent. Technically, you could interpret this as they also need to get a year of support or whatever it is, but since it doesn't specifically specify, we have to make our own righteous judgment as to what's considered an equitable compensation for a divorcee. In my case, I would probably want to provide a divorced wife with at least a year of support, maybe even more if I feel they need it. So each situation is going to vary. Okay, so we spoke about 241 just now. 3337. This is actually talking about setting the precedent that a man can marry the divorced wife of his adopted son. So feel free to read this at your leisure. This is about God talking to the Prophet Muhammad and telling him, or about what was intended, and yet at the same time, the Prophet Muhammad was trying to encourage Zayd to keep his wife because he didn't want to go through the situation, which, as a human being, I think we can all understand that. But God willed to establish a precedent here, and God's will must be done. And I think also when it comes to prophets and certain positions, there is a certain example that needs to be made that may not necessarily apply to the layman or the average person like you and me. 3349, O you who believe, if you married believing women, then divorce them before having intercourse with them, they do not owe you any waiting interim. You shall provide for them equitably and let them go amicably. So naturally, if the couple has not had intercourse, they don't have to worry about a 3-month waiting interim in case there's a pregnancy. So that's what I read this verse as. 65:1. O you prophet, when you divorce the women, you shall ensure that a divorce interim is fulfilled. So even the prophet is not above God's law when it comes to fulfilling divorce interims. You shall measure such an interim precisely. You shall reverence God your Lord. Do not evict them from their homes, nor shall you make life miserable for them, to force them to leave on their own unless they commit a proven abomination. The word here is fahisha, which is often seen as, kind of like a big sin or an abomination in this course. These are God's laws. Anyone who transgresses God's laws commits an injustice against his soul. You never know, maybe God wills something good to come out of this. So remember that God knows best. And for those of you who may be going through divorce and you submit to God, remember that God may will something good to come out of this. Whether the divorce continues or you reconcile, God is the one in charge. But let's rewind here for a minute, because this verse emphasizes the humanity of the Prophet Muhammad. Okay, unfortunately, too much of the Muslim world and many of my loved ones involved here have raised the Prophet to almost a superhuman level. But the fact is, all messengers walk the markets and eat as you do. They're all human beings, and they are all worried about their judgment between them and God. So, going back in this verse a little bit, God is telling the Prophet, do not evict them from their homes, nor shall you make life miserable for them. God is talking to the Prophet here. He's not talking to the believers. He knows that the Prophet is a human being. He knows that the Prophet might commit these errors. And yet he's telling him, don't do this. Don't be unrighteous. Don't force them to leave your home. That you were married to them. You owe them. You have a responsibility now. Unless they commit some proven abomination. And I've always interpreted that as being, going and somebody committing adultery as one example of an abomination. So I'll let you come to your own conclusions, because each person should read the Qur'an and come to their own conclusions. You don't have to follow any sheikhs or anything as some source of divine law. The Qur'an tells you everything you need to know. So take your time, study it. That's why we read the Qur'an over and over and over again, inshallah. So don't force them to leave, don't evict them, and don't make life miserable for them so that they feel so pressured to leave. And once the interim is fulfilled, you may reconcile with them righteously or go through with the separation righteously. You shall have two equitable witnesses witness the divorce before God. So it's always important that fair witnesses are brought to witness this. And this may have applied more in small communities today, or in some of the small communities way back when, 1400 years ago. I think today, not only do we have family and friends that usually witness this, but we also have a court system and legal agents that are all bearing witness to this, and it's written. So I feel like this witness requirement is easily fulfilled in a country that has that process for divorce. And finally, the last verse containing divorce is 66:5. So it's talking to the women. So this is kind of going the other way around now, addressing maybe the self-consciousness or ego even of a woman who fears that if this marriage between me and the Prophet breaks up, God can easily replace me. That's not a problem. So it does play on that, but it also encourages, if there's some unrighteous behavior from that woman, to try and change, reconcile, and keep that marriage intact. So God bless you all. I hope if anybody is going through this, that they find the strength from the Quran to remember that maybe God wills something good to come out of this. And it's important for us to do our best to take our egos out of a situation. Our egos tell us, oh, but then this person might move on and they might go marry somebody else. And that's kind of that controlling factor we hold. But remember, when we want to practice righteousness, when we want to seek redemption, we want to get rid of the ego and start thinking thoughts like, I want that person to be happy because I love them. And sometimes that means letting them go. And I want to be happy too. And God tells me, if this is happening to me, and I am a good submitter, that something very well good may come out of this. So have faith, inshallah, and peace, and God bless.